The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
You make my point. That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. But when a black man strikes back, he's an extremist. He's supposed to sit passively and have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy. No matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise, he's supposed to take it. But if he stands up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist. No, I think that the speaker who preceded me is getting exactly what he asked for. My reason for believing in extremism, intelligently directed extremism, extremism in defense of liberty, extremism in quest of justice, is because I firmly believe in my heart that the day that the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights, when his own freedom is being jeopardized, to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself. I live in America where there are only 22 million.
Welcome to Melanated Politics, y'all. I'm Eric Clark.
And I'm David Harper. Hello, everybody.
Hey, thank you for tuning in. Mr. Harper, how's everything been going, my brother?
Everything's been good, man. How you been?
All is well.
All right. Good to be here.
It's good to be here as well. Should we dive right into it or what?
Man, let's go ahead first. Let's get in. Let's get it. Let's just dive in. Let's do it.
Question. Are Donald Trump and his friends responsible for the recent anti-Asian violence in this country? Also, have we normalized racism in America? We'll get to that momentarily, but right now, let's check out what's going on in Washington, D.C. regarding the rights to vote for melanated people in this country. Yes, as far as the
HR1 bill.
Yes.
The HR1 bill that's coming up. Here we go.
Now the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The House of Representatives has approved the most sweeping voting rights bill in decades. The For the People Act, also known as House Resolution 1, passed Wednesday by a vote of 220 to 210, with every Republican opposing the bill. The legislation is aimed at improving voter registration and access to voting, ending partisan and racial gerrymandering, forcing the disclosure of dark money donors, increasing public funding for candidates, and imposing strict ethical and reporting standards on Congress members and members of the U.S. Supreme Court. The bill now heads to the Senate, where it's expected to be killed by Republicans unless all 50 Senate Democrats unite to end the filibuster. The House measure comes as voting rights are under attack in courthouses and state houses across the country. Republican state lawmakers have introduced over 250 bills in 43 states to limit voter access. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court appears poised to uphold controversial voting limits in Arizona in a case that would further gut the Voting Rights Act. During oral arguments Tuesday, attorney Michael Carvin, who represents the Arizona Republican Party, admitted increasing voter turnout, quote, puts us at a competitive disadvantage relative to Democrats. Politics is a zero-sum game, he said. Carvin's comment echoes a famous quote by the late conservative activist Paul Weyrich, co-founder of the Heritage Foundation. In 1980, he said, I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. Our leverage in the elections goes up as the voting populace goes down, Weyrich said. We're joined now by newly...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in watching that video, the beauty of that video, Eric, and everybody who's watching, is that you saw so many people in line ready to exercise their franchise in voting and seeing the power of their vote, believing in democracy. The challenge of that video is that the line was long as ever. Voting shouldn't be like getting on a ride at Disneyland or Six Flags or Universal or wherever theme park. It shouldn't be a long line. Voting should be easy for folks if you are exercising your citizenship, your civic duty, and wanting to shape policy and wanting to shape your voice. And HR 1, as what we talked about earlier, HR 1 expands voting rights, basically expanding early voting, having more ballot boxes. And the key piece in this legislation is that it ends gerrymandering. It makes it illegal. And for those of you who never heard of gerrymandering, we talk about gerrymandering all the time on the show,
yes, sir.
Especially during election time. If you're new to the show, during the elections, during any primary or any presidential elections, we are on it. And gerrymandering is a big part of that, because what it does, it allows, what happens is Democrats do it very little. In the state of Maryland, I think, where I'm from, they've done it. Maryland is a huge Democratic state. But in most states, it's Republicans making all crazy designs during the voting line. So it consolidates the smaller vote for people that are voting against them, and it expands votes for people that are going to vote for them. And basically, the voting lines are so crazy, and this bill ends that. So HR 1 is a bill that definitely puts pressure on Republicans to have to earn a vote and not suppress a vote. And there's pushback with it. And you're going to hear a lot more of this, as well as, which is a totally different topic. I'm sure we'll talk about this. DC statehood.
Yeah.
That's another reason why they don't want that, because think about it like this. Right now, the Republicans are in the minority. They don't have the White House. They don't have the Senate. They don't have the House of Representatives. But their argument as the minority is to suppress minority votes. And it's very ironic how that is. They want to choose who votes for them and basically kick out the people who don't want to vote, make it very harder for them, for people that don't want to vote for them. So this bill is very important. It's going to be, you're going to hear more about it. If you haven't, please tune in, because it's going to affect the whole country. If HR 1 passes, you're talking about people being able to vote without any obstructions. What do
you think about the most recent restrictions that Republicans and Republican states have handed down regarding voter ID laws? A lot of melanated folks, especially in the South, the Deep South, vote on Sundays, souls to the polls. Mm-hmm. That's been eliminated in a lot of states.
Yes.
So what do you think about all of these Republicans in these Republican states, these Republican lawmakers that have put forth legislation to suppress the vote? Since Donald Trump has been out of office, what do you think about all of that, Mr. Harper?
Okay, so let's take it back a step for a minute. What you just said, the Republicans in different states, whether it's Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Republicans, even the state of California here, you've had some Republicans say, hey, California's too big, let's break it into 3 states. Republicans are right now fighting a fight that the quote unquote founding fathers fought back in Pennsylvania. And the reason I have to say this, and the reason why Eric is laughing,
founding fathers, go ahead,
because I use the word founding father. Okay. But for this conversation, I have to go back and say that term. Basically, one of the biggest arguments was representation. And part of that representation was melanated. The show's called Melanated Politics.
Yes,
but
sir.
I'll always go back to melanation.
Yes, sir.
The founding fathers argued one of the arguments was representation. One of the arguments was separation of powers. One of the arguments is who votes, and the other argument was slavery.
Yes.
And they knew back then, at least some of them knew back then, that it's very hypocritical to write in the Constitution for independence.
That's where the whole 2/3 of a man came in.
That's where the whole 2/3 of a man came in.
To have adequate representation in the South, so the Southern politician can have even more representation.
You just said it.
And Washington, D.C., and also the 3/5 of a man that's in the Constitution, that pretty much lets you know what the whole foundation was.
What the whole foundation was. And
on paper.
So let's fast forward to 1964 and 1965. If you watch the show, you've heard me and Eric talk about this constantly, because this history keeps rolling up into real time, into real democracy, which we're seeing in HR 1 as we speak today. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 shifted everything.
Yeah.
That's why when you talk about America's turning on each other, as many of you may have watched the insurrection happen at the Capitol with the Capital City riots, there was actual murders and assassinations happening during the 60s.
Absolutely.
And the biggest part of those assassinations and the violence and
Black Sunday, Medgar Evers getting assassinated in his driveway,
was because they didn't want melanated people to vote. They didn't want black people to vote. That was a no-no. And once that happened, that shifted everything. So where we are now, Republicans already know in these states.
Okay, now quick question.
That they're losing.
Also, if voting is not as important as some say it is, why have so many barriers been put up to stop people from voting, melanated people, and from marginalizing those communities? Why do you think that is? Because
voting is everything. What is written in the law is more powerful than what is said in the words.
Yes, sir.
That's just the reality. Eric, in his quote after our show, every time says, "Politics is war without bloodshed," but you have to understand what laws are written in the books are the rules to the war.
Absolutely.
So if voting, it is sad because a lot of black folk, I'm not going to say because we had so many people vote in this past election, but there's a certain percentage of our community that believe voting is a waste of time. And if you think voting is a waste of time, if you think there's no power in voting, why do you think, one, the criminal justice laws are the way they are, and two, why are voter suppression laws the way they are? Well,
that's the reason why you can smoke a whole bunch of kush in California. And also, as we always stated on the show prior, mm-hmm. a lot of African nations and states mm-hmm. got their independence via voting. So those are just facts. Now, all this may sound like a nice pickup dinner during COVID. You call first, this is my name, I'll be there, wait in the parking lot.
Didn't they pass you the food? They pass you the
No, they pass you the food and a couple of drinks.
A couple of drinks.
But my point is this. When you peel the scab off and you look past, and you kind of like unsurface layer after layer after layer, there is one thing that the minority party in the Senate, ran by that snake in the grass, Confederate Mitch McConnell himself from Kentucky, it's the potential of a filibuster. Now, before we break down that filibuster like an improper fraction, let's take a look at the history of the filibusters in this country.
Small group of senators hell-bent on upholding white supremacy decided to flex the new rule and filibuster the legislation. The law, which would make the heinous act of hanging Black Americans by trees a crime, took 100 years to break a filibuster, and it still isn't law. During the Jim Crow era, Southern senators continued to use the filibuster as a tool to block civil rights legislation, and only civil rights legislation. Today, the filibuster is more common than ever, and Mitch McConnell can use it as a veto on almost every bill Democrats want to pass. Right now, H.R. 1 is sitting before the Senate. It expands voting rights, reforms campaign finance laws, and limits partisan gerrymandering. Woohoo! It already passed the House, and it deserves a vote in the Senate. But because of Rule 22, a bill has to get through 2 votes in the Senate. A supermajority vote to stop debate, even though debate is not required or even happening, and then a simple majority vote to pass the bill. Like I said before, it makes no sense. Even after an historic election where Americans voted for Democrats to control the White House, the Senate, and the House, the filibuster gives Mitch McConnell a veto on policies that the American people support. When a minority has this much control over the majority, voters are silenced. We need to get rid of the filibuster to keep our democracy.
There you have it. Now, what will the leader of the Senate from the state of New York, Chuck Schumer, what's his next move? Because we see the Republicans, we see their moves every single second of every single day because they're all about power. And they're all about making certain that they maintain a certain populace as the browning of America proceeds to increase and increase every single day. Now, what will the Democratic leadership do? Dick Durbin, Chuck Schumer. We just saw Elizabeth Warren. Okay,
this is where it gets.
Talk to us, David.
This is where it gets fascinating. This is where it gets real fascinating. What Chuck Schumer has to do, I can't just put it on Chuck Schumer. I have to put it also on Joe Biden because it's going to be an historical move to break the filibuster.
Will they be scared though? Because Mitch McConnell has been making threats lately.
I don't think. I don't think what Mitch McConnell said about being scorched earth. I don't think they're scared of that.
Like World War Z.
Like World War Z.
Yeah, like The Walking Dead or something.
Okay, you have to keep in mind. I'll just try to say. I'll say it like this, and this is the one thing I can give credit to the Democrats about in doing when it comes to this situation or just moving forward.
Yes.
Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Dick Durbin, and
Steny Hoyer, Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, they've been already
in the House, but they passed it in the
they
House.
Passed in the House.
We're talking about the Senate right now.
Joe Biden, Dick Durbin, Chuck Schumer.
Yes.
They understand that they have way more yesterdays than they do tomorrow.
Okay, but what about the Democrats that are on the fence?
The two that are on the fence,
Joe Manchin, your boy Joe,
and your girl Kristen Sinema. Your girl Kristen Sinema. You know how that blonde hair does something to you. Kristen Sinema, Senator of Arizona. Joe Manchin, Senator of West Virginia.
Yes.
Basically, this is the deal. Joe Manchin's in a tight spot because he knows two things happens if he breaks the filibuster. One, he knows Democrats will expand the Senate, meaning DC statehood, maybe Puerto Rico statehood. That means his voice becomes even smaller. Yes. Regardless of what he thinks, he matters now.
Yes.
But if he doesn't do the filibuster,
yes,
then Democrats are in a very tight spot, and Republicans are not banking on Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. They're banking on Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, and this is where it gets.
Okay, we'll go put them in a headlock. Joe Biden, according to the latest reports, either he just had a meeting with those you just mentioned,
Okay.
or he'll be doing that within the next couple of days.
He will most likely do it within the next, but because here's the thing, a little short history. The filibuster used to be at 67.
Yes.
It took 67 votes to pass major legislation.
Yes.
In 2013, former Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, who was the leader of the Senate for the Democrats, had to break the filibuster because your snake in the grass, Mitch McConnell, told the world that his mission in the Senate was to make Barack Obama a one-term senator.
Yes.
So their goal was to obstruct
a one-term president.
A one-term president. If he was in the Senate, it'd probably been cool. It's crazy because if Obama wasn't president, Mitch might have worked with him.
Exactly.
But as soon as he became president, that was it. And this is why, Harry Reid had to break the filibuster the first time, because there would have been nothing getting through. And for that matter, we only had 2 years of legislation getting through. If you go back and look at 2009, before the 2008, 2009. 2009, that year, that 1 year of being able to put through legislation before the midterms, that was it.
Absolutely. And you know that one of the top Negroes of the century, Dr. Ben Carson, recently was on an interview, I'm paraphrasing, and they posed a question to him: what do you think about voter ID laws? He said, no, they posed, let me rephrase. They posed the question: do you think that voter ID laws are racist by nature? He said, if someone doesn't produce an ID, that's racist. I mean, he's like a ventriloquist for the power structure that entered the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
It's a sad state of affairs when it comes to Ben Carson.
I mean, it's like he has puppet strings all over him.
He does. He is who he is. It's like, it's not even... We said we're gonna do a show.
And he won't even apologize like Stacey Dash.
You know what? Stacey Dash did apologize. You gonna give a call?
Do you want to play Cry Me a River, or do you want me to play it?
Talk on the mic, please.
Okay. So
listen, basically what it comes down to when it comes to the filibuster.
Yes.
The filibuster is an amazing tool when it's used properly.
Yes, sir.
But when it's used to obstruct citizens from voting, that's a problem. When it's used to obstruct and not use real debate,
yes,
to really help the country, then that's a problem. Here's again, short history. When Joe Biden was in the Senate, and I'll just go back to the 80s, during when Reagan was president, our body of government in the Senate and the House was very like-minded, meaning it was predominantly white male. You did have some white women, and of course you had some brothers and sisters in the House, not in the Senate, but in the House of Representatives. But more or less, the Senate in particular was predominantly white male. There was more agreement on, even if you were from a different part of the country, because you were white male and because you come from a traditional white male upbringing, you're going to have more consensus, whether you're Democrat, Republican, conservative, or liberal, however you want to call it. When our body of government started changing, that's when the friction hit.
Yes, sir.
And when, truth be told, when Barack Obama went from a junior senator to president, that was a shock to the system, to the body of government. And that was a shock to the system for people that not too long ago remembered when they were in control.
Yes.
So the filibuster became more of a tool, as Elizabeth Warren talked about, to move forward and to use strategically against the will of the people. Right now, if you're a Republican, you only need 47 to, I think maybe 48% of the population, not even 50% of the population, to win control.
Yes.
If you're a Democrat, you have to win at least, I think Joe Biden got 53 point something, or 54% of the vote. You have to win plus 50% to get a very slim majority. And so part of those tools that Mitch McConnell used, whether it's the filibuster or whether it's voting as HR 1, whether it's obstructing, or whether it's using your power to push through Supreme Court justices, they're going to use it because the numbers don't favor them.
Okay, so before we move on, another quick question.
Yes.
From this point on, what are the Democrats' next move?
Joe Biden has to talk to
in the Senate.
Joe Biden
regarding the filibuster.
Joe Biden and I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to have to talk to Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin and say that reform has to happen. We don't have to end the filibuster, but the reform of them arguing, they're gonna have to, if they want to argue a bill, all of them are gonna have to argue until the next.
But what if they're in the type of districts that dictate how their vote will go either way? What if it costs them with their constituents to back up the Democratic Party on this cause?
The person that's going to be hurt the most is going to be Joe Manchin.
Because he's in West Virginia.
He's in West Virginia. West Virginia is Trump country. I've been to West Virginia twice. I know this. They believe in guns. They believe in God. They're good people. But they believe in guns. They believe in God. Let me say this first. They believe in God first. They believe in guns. They believe in marriage between a man and a woman solely. They are very. When I went there, the people treated me very nice. It is the buckle.
Yeah,
as much as people talk about Alabama and Tennessee and that part of the South, that mountain, West Virginia, oh yes, Bible all the way. And so just to kind of sum it up, Joe Manchin is the one with the most to lose.
Yes.
If he ends up voting, and I think his last election was this past election, so he's going to be good for the next couple of years. But when it comes around in 2026, I think it is, he definitely is going to have a fight. So, who knows? And by that time, if the Democrats end up expanding the Senate, Joe Manchin may become a Republican. Who knows? And that way he could stay with a voice in the Senate.
Melanin, the essence of color, politics, war without bloodshed. And that's a whole lot of war without bloodshed. As a result of the 2 mass shootings in America within the last 1 week, there's so many people talking, grieving, asking questions. Everything is under a microscope. Words have consequences. Actions have consequences, whether they precipitate each other or not. So let's go back to the question that we posed at the beginning of the show. Are Donald Trump and his friends responsible for the recent anti-Asian hate and violence? Before we talk about that, let's check this out.
Racism is a virus.
One of the things I think about as an Asian American historian is how tragically this is not new. In the 1860s and 1870s and 1880s, Chinese in the United States were blamed then for outbreaks of smallpox. In the early 1900s, newly arrived Japanese migrants were targeted for the outbreak of bubonic plague. And I think about the history of U.S. colonialism in the Philippines and how Filipino bodies were referred to as incubators of leprosy. So this is a very long history of how outbreaks of disease have been directly connected to anti-Asian sentiment.
And we will very easily defeat the China virus. That's what's happening. We're doing a great job relative to other countries on the coronavirus. You know how many names we have? Like 22 different names. I call it the China virus.
The president has held China accountable for covering up the China virus and allowing it to spread death and economic destruction in America and around the world.
As the president has been describing the coronavirus, he's been calling it the Kung flu. Do you think that that's an appropriate way to characterize the coronavirus?
Scholars and health officials have already pointed out that we should not be labeling epidemics and disease outbreaks after places and after people. When we do that, we see the rise of stigma and scapegoating.
Do you think that's the most pressing issue you have about the coronavirus?
Think about that.
I know, but what I'm thinking about is why that is your most pressing issue as a question.
Well,
when we just seen a spike in coronavirus, you're concerned about somebody on the way they name it.
The rise of anti-Asian sentiment is directly connected to political rhetoric.
History repeats itself, and words definitely have consequences.
Absolutely. Donald Trump, Pompeo, Republicans,
Mike McCarthy,
Republicans in general who have been wrongly in a derogatory way labeling the coronavirus as something else.
Meghan McCain from The View.
It's basically it's in their DNA. It's just in their DNA.
Facts.
It's the way it's gone. I mean, black folks have gone through it. Latino community, whether you're Mexican, Puerto Rican, Dominican, from El Salvador, Cuban, wherever you're from, you've maybe Cuban not as much because Cubans Republicans love Cubans, but
yeah.
It's in their playbook always in their playbook.
And this guy who assassinated those individuals in Atlanta, and then he turned around and blamed it on some type of sex situation, and the cops actually took his word for that and released that in a press conference when it was later determined that a lot of these women were elderly women. So that logic and that excuse flies right out of the window. As we saw just there's been an increase.
Oh yeah, spike for sure.
There's been a spike in violence
for sure
in Asian American communities. I mean, it's all over the internet. It's on YouTube. It's on, it's on Instagram. It's everywhere.
It's
Even
everywhere.
the elder I was just reading this morning. I forgot her name. I apologize for that. But I think she had a GoFundMe or something like that was set up, and she raised close to $1 million, and she promised to give that to organizations that are on the front line fighting Asian violence, because you have people like Donald Trump that, people know what they're doing and they know what they're saying. They simply do not care. That man is 80 years old, and he's a billionaire. Close to 80 years old, he's a billionaire. He knows exactly what he's saying. He knows the consequences behind his words. Let's not be gullible. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care, but let's just make it clear. He's not the cause of this hate, but he's the one. He loves stirring the pot, and he's always known back in his days in New York City to stir the pot of issue that's always existed.
Well, whenever the majority population is under threat, there's always a boogeyman.
Boogeyman, women, and child. Always.
Yes. And as a result of the coronavirus, he promoted that the boogeyman was China and Asian Americans and other Asians that live in America. As you just stated, is it solely his fault? No. Was this happening prior to the Trump presidency? Of course, that's obvious. But still, it is what it is.
I had quick story when I lived in Detroit, when I used to do the auto show for Ford. There was a gentleman, because him and I, this gentleman, he strictly dated black women.
He was Asian?
He was Asian. He strictly dated black. And he lived in Detroit. In Detroit, or outside of Detroit. But basically, he was a photographer. He was a big tech guy. But he told me that his father was out taking a walk one day, and some white guys knocked him out, put him in the hospital, and so the school he went to, he said he got teased, but the people that that he gravitated to and also had his back were black folks. I do understand though that this isn't always the case. We're not ignoring the discrepancy between the black community and the Asian community too, because there's that, but there's a whole lot of love and a whole lot of support one another too.
And a lot of feds, a lot of different federal law enforcement agencies and officers have sent more cops to these communities after what happened in Atlanta.
Yes. But the one thing that we do have to recognize is the consistency and the pattern.
That's my point.
The pattern, not just in the violence, but also in the coddling of these shooters. They coddled the police officer outside of Atlanta, said that the shooter had a bad day.
Okay, if he said he took a lot of heat. He said
he
and knew exactly what he meant when he said that.
Right, and then with Dylan Roof, with the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina,
exactly.
Was it Burger King?
It was Burger King.
They took him to Burger King after the shooting.
And you know what? Both of those situations, the commonality of both of those situations are, they both lived.
They both lived.
If had they been black, African American, melanated, they would have never made it inside of the patrol vehicle.
Or if they would have made it, he would have been bloody because they would have said he resisted arrest. They would have just beat him down. But the pattern of just the coddling, like, who do you know? What other group of people can shoot up a church, shoot up
a grocery store,
or shoot up a
movie theater in Colorado,
a
school in Colorado,
and also shoot up a nail salon,
and then in Vegas,
and then say like, hey, this was they had a bad day. Let's get them something to eat, or if they killed, like, was the woman in Dallas, the police officer in Dallas that killed the brother that was living in his apartment.
Yes.
And during the trial, the judge gave her a hug and gave her a Bible or something. So I'm like, the whole coddling.
Yeah.
The whole, it's just
and it
really
brings us back to that graph that we played, I believe, last year.
Mm-hmm.
If a Muslim kills a group of people, he's labeled as a terrorist.
Yes, indeed.
If a brother kills a group of people, he's labeled as a thug.
Yes.
Okay. If a white dude kills a group of people, especially in this country, you know what he's labeled as? Someone with a mental problem or a lone wolf.
A lone wolf, yeah.
If you don't knock it off.
Yeah, lone wolf.
Don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining.
It was the lone
and
wolf.
The sun is out.
Yes.
At Venice Beach.
Y'all have to really understand. If you haven't been to Venice Beach, you understand that.
Now, what does this have to do with melanated folk? A little bit of everything.
Everything, yeah.
I would say. There has been tension between Asians and melanated brothers and sisters all throughout different communities in America. But what I want our audience to do is let's listen to all of this from an Asian perspective, from a young lady by the name of Cheyenne Lynn. Go ahead, Cheyenne.
And that is, why is it so hard for Asian Americans to talk about how they take part in anti-Black racism? I think the main reason is that there's a lot of resentment between the Black and Asian communities. We've hurt each other, but only one of us has benefited from white supremacy. We Asian Americans have weaponized our proximity to whiteness in order to murder Black people. George Floyd and Latasha Harlins should be here today, but they aren't because of our individual actions. and our collective inaction. We can't just blame white people for pitting us against each other either, because the fact of the matter is that Asian cultures have a huge colorism problem and a huge problem with black people. And this idea that we can't just blame white people, but that we have to blame ourselves and look inward is hard and uncomfortable. But it should be. It should make you feel guilty and wrong. And those are tough feelings to process, but do you know what's tougher? Being hunted down and murdered just for existing. Asian Americans must stand in solidarity with black people. We cannot continue to stand idly by and let fellow people of color get murdered. Our whiteness is conditional and not something that we should cling to. Our fight against the white capitalist patriarchy is the same, and we need to understand that. So that's it for...
Wow. Let me just say, me and my sister Tia, shout out my sister Tia, we had this conversation, I guess, a week ago.
What's up, Tia?
Basically, it's layered, because I personally feel, and I could be wrong about this, maybe because I grew up on the East Coast. I living in D.C., where there's, outside of D.C. in PG County, where there's a big Filipino community, there's decent sized Asian community, but I grew up, around Filipino people. The house that we rented from in Fort Washington was owned by a Filipino guy, and that's in a black neighborhood, that's in a black region. But I know Asian culture is not a monolith. Because you have Filipino, you have Korean, you have Chinese, you have Japanese. Okay. And so the conversation needs to be had, but it's very deep. Yeah. And it's layered. And I feel like the connection between black and Asians have always been there, one way or another.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and simplify this.
Let's do it.
Do you recall the stores that I pointed out on the way to Morris Media Studios to do this show?
And we had this conversation just a few moments ago. Yes,
on the way here.
Yes, you did. Yes.
All the way from Torrance to Gardena. Through Los Angeles.
To LA, yep.
We saw a lot of melanated people.
Yes.
But a lot of the stores were Asian owned.
Yes.
My point is this. Until melanated brothers and sisters control the economics in our own communities, there will always be tensions with the Asians, because they own and run a lot of the stores, especially in the greater Los Angeles area.
Yes.
Now, what do we own in Koreatown? How many soul food restaurants on Koreatown? How many barbershops on Koreatown? I do Sunday turn up with a lot of my friends, with the lowriders, with the motorcycles, with the fast car, the figure eights and donuts, all of that. We don't do that in Koreatown. Okay, but they set up shop in our communities. And that led to, that was one of the reasons why that led to the death and assassination of our dear sister, Natasha Harlings, that happened in my home city of Compton.
Right.
So, once again, I think it's worth mentioning again, until melanated people, until black folk are in complete control of the economics going in and coming out in our own communities in the greater Los Angeles area and beyond, as opposed to a lot of Asians getting that money from us.
Quick question.
There will always be, what did Biggie say? What's beef?
Was beef. Oh, and what you said was a thousand times correct, but here's a question I have for you.
Yes.
Do you see Koreans or Asians, any Asians, owning stores in white neighborhoods?
Some, but not at the level
that they're doing.
Not at the level that they're doing in black. So let me, and I will be remiss if I did not give a shout out in a shot of empathy and sympathy and respect to the family members of those Asian individuals who tragically lost their lives in Atlanta.
Here's my question, because this is a two-parter.
Okay.
One,
we don't run anything in the Asian community economically. They run stuff in ours. Facts.
Right. Now, here's the question. Is that because the banks and the way the system is set up that they're not, real quick, they're not releasing capital to us?
Okay.
Or is it also because when the banks do ease up equity to Asian community, they say you got to go here and not anywhere else?
That's one of the reasons, and the other reasons it'll take too long to break down. But I will say that I would be remiss, there are many, for those that don't live in Los Angeles, never been to Los Angeles, there are many Black-owned businesses in Los Angeles, especially where we are now.
Where we are now, yes.
Historic Leimert Park area.
Yes.
You know, there's plenty of stores and businesses and home ownership and ownership of land property,
yes.
Commercial, residential, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, yes.
But that's not the point. The point is we need to continue to band together and treat each other economically how other groups in this country do
for themselves.
Exactly. So I'm not mad at Asian people for owning businesses in the Black communities. If anyone, I'm more mad at brothers like myself for not owning more. Go ahead.
But you know what's so deep? And you know, that's a great point, because it's not just in LA. You can say it's in DC. You can say it's all over the country, or in Maryland or in New York or wherever. But but the thing that makes me think about this in the same way, but also to kind of expand, is that when the capital is given, do they? Because I'm not.
They loan each other money.
I know they loan each other money, but do they come here because it's the only place they can afford, or that's where the business is?
No, it's social, it's psychological, and it's how someone is raised. So a lot of us were raised to be consumers as opposed to producers. A lot of us were raised to, boy, when you get up, get out there and get a job. See, they were taught you don't work for no one except for your family and your people.
Man, we got.
See, one of
about to go down another road.
Bottom line, and we're too stuck on individualism.
Yes, we are.
And judging each other.
Yes, we are.
And when we deal with each other, everyone has to be perfect. Everyone has to say everything perfect. We forgive everyone else except for our own people.
True.
You can't even cut someone off and say, my bad, my bad, my. They still want to look at you like they like it's an issue. But that's just in general.
See, I was trying to be nice driving here.
When you have unity and you stick together and you have loyalty, economics and everything else will fall in place. So right now we are returning to our original state of existence, and we are following the examples of the brothers and sisters that control the economics, not only in the greater Los Angeles area, but elsewhere.
Right.
You know what else we were talking about that we failed to mention?
What's that?
The normalization of racism in America.
Okay.
It's become very normal. It's become like, Fox News used to be what was considered to be dramatic or drastic or extreme, and Rush Limbaugh.
I know you want to say something. Go ahead.
Well, the bottom line is it's been normalized.
Okay, I thought you were going to say something else. What's cool? Normalized.
It's been normalized. We thought we were going to call him a snake in the grass.
No, I thought you were going to say something. I digress. Let's. Oh,
but moving right along, let's check out the normalization of racism in America. Let's show that clip.
So I really would like to know, because I've been knowing you for years since I've been here, and I've never seen anything come out of you other than, if I don't know, I'm willing to learn. If it comes off a certain way, I stand corrected.
Right.
That's the only thing I've seen.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who may feel that while you're standing by your friend, it appears that you give validation or safe haven to something that he has uttered that is racist. Even if you don't agree, am I saying it right?
I don't know what he's uttered that's racist. I'm not trying to slide out of this one.
Right.
I don't know. Tell me, what has he uttered that's racist?
Wednesday's episode of The Talk got intense as Cheryl Underwood confronted her co-host Sharon Osbourne for supporting Piers Morgan after he made controversial comments towards Meghan Markle following her sit-down interview with Oprah. Throughout the conversation, Sharon became very defensive over her friendship with Piers and even lashed out at Cheryl. Take a look.
I feel even like I'm about to be put in the electric chair because I have a friend who many people think is a racist, so that makes me a racist. And for me, at 68 years of age, to have to turn around and say, I ain't racist.
Right.
What's it got to do with me? Okay, how can I be racist about anybody?
Straight drama. I guess what disqualifies you from being a racist or a racist sympathizer? You're 68. You have a puppy on television. Are you kidding me?
Seeing that dog, her dog, the little space for dogs. Here, real quick, here in LA, here in California, the treatment towards dogs is in so many ways it's so much better than the treatment towards melanated people. I mean, I give you an example. Yeah. I'm gonna be real quick. I'm on soapbox and we talk about the dog.
Go ahead, brother.
I'm in Target. And of course, in every place, let the dogs roll in. I'm sorry, I do like dogs, but it's just like the love of dogs is very, very fascinating here. I'm in Target,
yes,
and this dog, he does his thing. He goes to the bathroom and does his thing.
They took the dog to the restroom.
No. He was walking through the Target, and as he was walking,
doing his thing.
He did his thing.
Okay.
So I'm just like, okay, an animal can do their thing.
Yes. On
the ground, everywhere, this, that, and the third. And it's like, okay, so the Target people got to clean it up.
Yes.
I felt bad for the Target people because I know they didn't sign up to clean up no dog stuff.
Okay.
You know, but if grown people did it, if a person, you know, just, hey, I'm gonna take my pants out and go to the bathroom, they'd be kicked out.
Well, let's take this call and see what the audience has to say about all of this. Welcome to Melanated Politics.
Hello, this is Kevin. How you gentlemen doing today?
Hey, we're doing well, Kevin. How are you doing today?
What's going on, like Marvin Gaye, my brother?
Interesting topics as usual. I like to offer a little commentary. I see you're limited on time, so I'll make it quick. But first of all, I'll just talk about the psychology of what we deal with in America. First of all, America suffers from cognitive dissonance when they see mirrored images of things differently. Like when a certain group uses drugs, it's a crime. When another group uses drugs, it's an illness. When certain people collect supplies during a hurricane, that's collecting. When other people do the same thing, it's looting. I think that's what McConnell suffers from. Because if he doesn't remember the history of how they address not the Supreme Court justice appointment, the use of filibuster and other things, and then try to turn around and tell Democrats how what they're doing is a power grab, he's obviously suffering from that psychological ailment. I'll just say that for the least. And if the Democrats are smart, they would just go ahead and legislate with their scorched earth philosophy, do what they have to do, the way President Obama did when he had a limited time with his Congress. And then when midterms come, just put it out there and just tell them, well, you people in your red states, look who voted for COVID relief, look who voted for everything benefited you. And if you're not smart enough to vote with what your best interest is, then so be it. I'll just leave it at that. And as so far as Trump and these riots and all his behavior, definitely he understands the psychology of the power of suggestion. I mean, think about it. Look at TV advertisements. Why do you think they have women in bikinis eating big hamburgers? The women who look like that usually don't even eat that kind of stuff. Because it'll tell some people subliminally, man, maybe if I go buy a hamburger like that, I'll meet somebody that looks like that in that bikini while I'm out there. And then I'll just end up with both the hamburger and the honey with the bikini. That's the power of suggestion. So I'll leave that at that. And as so far as Trump, yeah, he understands the power of suggestion. He knows when you can get on Fox News and tell uninformed people that your country is being taken over by migrants, all those other people are getting your jobs and all that, and then don't do nothing for them at the same time. You can work them into a frenzy that doesn't have a solution, and you have what they call useful idiots. So I look at that as basically a flashcard of the political spectrum as I'm viewing it right about now.
Hey, Kev, thanks as always for your comments. Everything you said is on point.
My pleasure, gentlemen.
All right, you have a good one.
All right, you do the same.
All right.
That was deep.
You know what? Hey, Kev, I know you're still listening. The one thing I wanted to say is that for some of the senators as well as the American public, I do think it's cognitive dissonance. Some of them. But for a good portion of them, I think it's just the way they feel.
I think it's they have a I don't give a F attitude.
Yeah, I think it's just the way they feel. I think that's the way they feel. I think they're cut from that again, I go back to when in Philadelphia,
that Confederate cloth.
The Confederate cloth. Yeah, they the Articles of Confederacy. You know, they believe before the Constitution was written, there was another Constitution that was something that wasn't about a centralized government. And I think that's their mindset. And I think Mitch McConnell is very aware. He's smart enough. He's a brilliant dude. He is far from ignorant, stupid, or not knowing what he's doing. He knows what move. He is a master chess player. So I feel like only thing he suffers from is time running out on him, and that's really it. And so that's why I feel. But going back to the normalizing of racism, I think people in this country or around the world, white folks around the world, when it comes to melanated people, whether you're from the U.S., whether you're from the continent, whether you're from Jamaica, whether you're from India, no matter where you're from, if you're melanated,
you're right.
The way they approach race and racism and what is racism is beyond different than the reality of what they're trying to explain.
And a lot of things.
Sharon Osbourne is a perfect example of that.
Exactly. And all this figuring this stuff out, it's actually simple. It's simplistic. It's not deep. It's not hard. It's not complicated. It's not calculus. It's not trig. It's arithmetic. Okay? Because the only thing these individuals are doing, they're telling us the truth. Because there's three types of people in this world that will tell you the truth. A child, a drunk, and a politician in a meeting with his fundraisers.
Absolutely. Wow, that was, you know what? Yes, absolutely. That's the first time I've heard that. That was, you have to coin that. You have to copyright that.
Our producer's dad recently suffered a stroke, so we would like to give him a shout out of our thoughts and our prayers.
Yes.
And you will remain in our thoughts and our family, in our prayer. You will remain in our thoughts and our prayers along with your family. So shout out to our producer, Sheena Lester. And we will continue to think about and pray for your dad.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yes, sir.
I think right now what's going on in our country is it's a major shift.
Yes.
And as we do on the show here at this historic studio here at Morris Media,
yes,
we're going to keep continuing to let everybody know and give our perspective of what's really going on, and just tell the truth. And we want to thank the poetess as well for always giving us this platform, allowing us to have this platform. Thank you. And we want to thank Sheena again for everything that she does. And we thank you.
Absolutely. I concur. You know, if not us, who? If not now, when? All we have is us, and we shall continue to let our tongue be our gun and allow our wisdom to be our ammunition. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Melanated Politics, Melanin, the essence of color, and politics, war without bloodshed. We're out, y'all.
Peace.